I know you guys have been hounding me for a long time to get another C4 Corvette project. Well, I got one. The thing is, this project actually isn't mine. This is a guy named Steve. He saw my channel, or he saw my videos on YouTube, and he decided, well, I did a good job with the last 85 that I had. Let's get his back on the road. He's had it for quite a bit of time, but never really was able to get it to be daily driver status, which is what you want when you have a car like this. So he dropped it off to me, and he said, go to town on it. So that's what we're going to do. Main problems it has is it doesn't run more than it starts and then dies. So we have to figure that out. Also, if you take a look at that steering wheel, it's not attached by much. I'm going to have to go ahead and get it put back together. Here's a view under the hood, which actually looks pretty nice under the hood considering. We're spending a lot of time under here, I think. The first thing I need to do on this car is get that steering wheel back on so it doesn't come off and I can actually be able to move it around the yard. You guys have seen in a previous video the white C4 that I'm selling for my mother-in-law. This car will be going in that garage spot and getting worked on. Before I bother to get this thing to run, I need to fix the steering column. I had to dig through all these parts in this car in order to find the little pieces that go to the steering column. Luckily, since I had my 85, I have this book. And this book shows me that really the only things that are missing are from here up. Everything else is in there, which is good. Now if you'll notice, I have two steering wheels. I have this steering wheel and I have that steering wheel. This steering wheel is toast. But funny thing, this steering wheel is actually from my old 1985 Corvette. I met Steve selling the steering wheel and he figured that steering wheel, which isn't perfect, is a lot better than his, and he bought it from me. And you know what? It is. This one's just totally gone. So the other one will look better. It'll make the car look a lot better. The first thing I need to do though, before I can put the new one on, is I need to take the shaft out of this one. It's been stuck. So I need to put that on the vise on the bench, get it out, and then from there we can start reassembling the column. The only piece that I couldn't find is this lock plate. And luckily for Steve, I had an extra one in my parts from a C3. They're actually the same thing. I believe from 78 and up. Anyway, close enough that it will work for this car. Here's the basic order of how to put this column back together. Believe it or not, it's really similar to the C3s. So first you have this shaft. You have to make sure you don't lose this part because this is what stops it from telescoping. Also there's a keyway right here and you need to make sure you keep your hands on, don't lose it. Then it's a spring, then it's the turn signal cancel cam, and it's this lock plate, and then from there everything gets locked down under this bracket right here. Now there's a piece that's not here, which is, I believe the book calls it a snap ring horn connector retainer, and that goes here, and then all these spacers, and then the nut, and then the steering wheel goes on, and then that for the tilt. So first you got to put this in there. And it goes all the way down, just like that. Next, you have this ring. Next, you have these. To put on this lock plate, it's pretty simple. It needs to be pushed down, and then this big washer needs to be put in. You can see these grooves back here. It kind of locks up like this. Let me show you. Like that, and holds everything together. The trick is though, if you have your typical, this is what you'd use to push, this threads onto the center, you turn this nut down and then that pushes the plate back wall. You can push that washer and then it all comes back. The problem is, see how I did this? It's going to do this while you're wrenching on it. So let me show you a trick. This is the stock, it's I called it a star bolt. Basically, this bolt threads all the way down in and then pushes on that rod that you saw, and when you turn this to the right, it pushes down and then locks this in place. But here's the problem. You can't use that star bolt. So what I have right here is a star bolt out of a C3, but I've machined it down with my grinder so that it will fit in here and hold this down, so that way I can use the tool to put it all together. Another very common problem with these columns is that the tool that people use in order to actually pull the steering wheel out messes up the threads inside. I couldn't get either my bit or the one that came with the car to fit in here, and the reason is because the tool has messed it up. So what I have to do is I have to get a tap like this and fix up those threads. It's just something you might come across when you do this. You probably will if you used that AutoZone tool to get it off. I'm using a 1/4 inch driver because the little tool I have in my tap and die set doesn't fit a tap this big, which is stupid. I got it used, so whatever. Anyway, once you get past that first little ring part, it goes in pretty nice. Let me back that out. Yeah, the problem is, I'll show you here in a second. The problem is you use this to pull the steering wheel and it comes in contact right there. And with that said, it messes up the threads inside. I'm going to get rid of all these shavings and then, let's see. Ooh. And now this threads in oh so quite nicely. Now with my nifty little tool, basically what I like to do is get a crescent wrench and then you just turn it and you can watch that lock ring in the back get compressed. See it go down? I've used the tool to push everything down enough that I can see that groove, and really the easiest way to do this is to pop that in and then use a big flat blade screwdriver like this to kind of shove it down. That's the best thing I can tell you to do. It is days later. I finally got the piece I was missing. It was the horn contact retainer piece, and now I was able to put the steering wheel on. So finally this car is beginning to look like a car. The last few pieces to put on, this is your tilt control, and then from there you can put on the horn button and the little wire and you're done. So pretty simple, and now it's actually able to move, or at least steer under its own power, which is always a good thing. With the steering wheel all together, I'm able to get the car into the garage. The car does exactly what was described to me when it was dropped off. It starts up for a second and then automatically dies. That tells me it's probably a fuel issue. I don't think it's a ignition issue because it actually starts. Let's see if he'll do it. Well, it was doing it earlier. I got it to do it 3 or 4 times. But here's something interesting. My fuel gauge shows 0. When I had the fuel gauge on it before, it went up to about 30. But the weird part about it had pressure, but it didn't have any fuel coming out of the little port when you relieve the pressure. Super weird. Anyways, so that leads me to believe it might be a fuel pump issue. It also could be a contamination of the gas issue. I went ahead and pulled apart this part of the gas tank, and you look, all kinds of rust around here, all kinds of wet down there, and you can see like streams of rust coming from the tank, which luckily these sending units are fairly easy to fix. But at the same time, I'm going to drain the tank before I pull the sending unit. Hopefully the car just has a whole bunch of bad gas. We'll see. But yeah, it's not looking good for the fuel system. I'm not sure if the car sat outside or how long the car's actually been sitting, but bad gas will make the car act like it is. Same goes for bad injectors, same goes for an intermittent fuel pump, all that kind of stuff. But it did run for at least a second. I know the car isn't out of gas for the fact that I have this awesome measuring tool, really fancy and expensive, but I stuck it down the the gas tank like so until it hits the bottom. Oh, broke my stick. Oh, broke my stick. I had to do it with two hands, but you can see that, you know, there's a good 6 inches of gas in there. Whether it's any good or what, I don't know. I'm about to go get my electric fuel pump and pump all the gas out. Well, my homemade contraption device has worked. As I suspected, that gasket right there is totally shot, and considering how rusty it is, I know rust has been getting in that tank. I got most of the gas out. Believe it or not, I ran out of bottles. But let me show you guys. So this is the first, second, third, fourth gallon, I guess, that I got out. You can see on the bottom, and this fuel pump's been replaced before, but you see how nasty that is. But check this out. So this, I believe, is rusty water at the bottom and gas at the top. I think that's what the engine was trying to run on. Was that nasty stuff right there? It was definitely water in the tank. Engines don't like water in the tank. This gallon, or I guess this apple juice container, the gas is probably okay, but there's no use in putting it back where it could be mixed with water. I'm gonna let these sit for a little bit, but yeah, that's the way that it goes. If you sit outside and you replaced your fuel pump and you haven't replaced this gasket, you need to do it, because this is what happens if you don't. Alright, we're back to fixing the leaky fuel tank. I got another about gallon and a quarter out of this tank. Really gross gas. Anyway, here's the major source of the problem. This tank was cleaned out about 2 years ago, but then left outside, and this gasket wasn't replaced. You can see all the rust on the edge where the old gasket was. Water just poured down, and then boom, it gets inside your tank. Underneath that needs cleaned as well. But I wiped the bottom of the tank with these rags, and that was all the rust that's in that tank. So, learn the lesson from this. If you mess with your sender or your fuel pump at all, replace the gasket. Just do yourself a favor, then you don't have to do this again. Another thing that I'm going to do just because, well, guess what? It's like $2, $3. Replace this sock. I don't know if this one's been replaced. If it has, it's had a whole bunch of crap sucked up into it. But, yep, new sock. Might as well do it, especially if the pump's somewhat recent. One thing that I want to do, just because there was so much crap in the fuel tank, is replace this fuel filter. It's actually located on the passenger side of the car. Underneath. Right here. So that one looks fairly new, but you know, for the amount of money these things cost, and for the amount of crap that was in that fuel tank, it's better just to replace it. It's pretty simple. You just break the nut free here, so on the other side, and then the bracket comes off on a bolt on the top, and you take it out and you put it in, and that's about it. Since the tank is clean, the filter's changed, everything's all sealed up really, really nice, we can put in new gas. This gas is a little different color than the stuff I took out. The stuff I took out was gold. This is pretty much white. Well, she runs. Not very well, but she runs. Lots of missing. Fuel pressure looks okay. Hoping it'll clean up. So I've grounded A to B. I'm going to turn my ignition on. It'll start blinking. At least it should. So that's going to be a code 12. One blink, one slow blink, and then 2 fast blinks is a 12. That's the beginning of your codes. So I'll do it one more time. Blink. 1, 2. Now it's going to come with codes. 30, think that's a 33. 1, 2. Okay, it's going to do 33 through a third time. Let's see what it does next. And a 12. Okay, so that means it's done. So that 12 is what you start with. So it starts with a 12, then 33, and then if it had more codes, it would list them. Then 12. So we'll look up what a 33 is. So here is code 33, which is the mass airflow sensor with the math, which pretty I've built with this before, so I'm happy to see about it. Pretty simple. Basically, clear the code, see if it comes on again. If it comes on again, then you pretty much troubleshoot it step by step until you get it to go away. I think it's either a bad math or it's not positioned correctly. We'll see. Well, it's been a little while since you guys have seen this Red C4 on my channel. Between 2 vacations and staying within budget and all that, there's a few really expensive parts. We're finally back to the point where we can get it back on the road. You guys already saw part 1, so this is going to be part 2. There's Chopstick and Noodle being good guard dogs, so the chickens don't go inside of my shop because they poop. There they are staring each other down. I don't know if I included this in the last video, but I pulled codes for the MAF sensor, and I have a new one coming, so I have that pulled and ready to put in. I couldn't really see any issues with the old one other than the... Let's see, where did I put that? The only issue I could see with the old one, other than it being dirty, is the silicone seal around the bottom has come off. There we go. Letting moisture in, maybe. I mean, it's worth a shot. I've tried to clean it and it didn't really do anything, so that's the next step. Hopefully that will make it run just a little bit better. But before that, I want to show you guys this. So this is the instrument cluster that had been sent off and got rebuilt. Now, these are pretty expensive. It was about 400 bucks to get these rebuilt. The cool part is, here's the website. It's batty.com. Hope I'm saying that right. But he sent all the old crap that he pulled out of it, and the pieces that had issues like that. I don't know if you can see how that's fused together. He put the old pins, sent the old pins, he sent the old odometer motor, he sent all the broken screen, polarization crap that has been replaced, and some extra light bulbs. So I'm going to keep these light bulbs because these light bulbs are for me. But this should look awesome when it's done. It has all new lenses, all the circuit boards inside have been changed, new odometer motor, and also the light bulbs that light it up are new. So that should look brand new once it is put in, and that's what we're going to do today. Alright, the new cluster's in. This is going to be pretty awesome. Look at that. Look how awesome that is. Alright, so right now we have almost no gas. Tack and speedo are at 0. Oil pressure 80. I don't think that's right. Oil temperature low. Range 0 miles. Odometer 0. Coolant temp low. Volts 11.9, it's about right. Battery needs to charge some more. And then we're averaging 13. I don't see how, but anyway, I think it's awesome. It's actually all lit up and it looks really, really good. So that's one thing off the list. The reason why is now I can troubleshoot just a little bit better with the gauge cluster and actually showing me what's happening under the hood instead of being completely blind. So how awesome is that? Alright, so there's the old map. We have the new one in, and you know what? It runs a whole bunch better, but it has a miss. So it starts up much better. The code for the mass airflow sensor is gone, but it has a miss and it won't idle. And what I did was I took my heat gun right there and I went to all the where the exhaust manifold comes out of the engine, and for the most part they're all in about 250, 300 degrees or so. I let it run with my foot on the gas pedal for a while, but this one is only 100. So that tells me that cylinder is not firing for Could be like 4 different reasons, but we're going to start with a spark plug. I pulled it out. It might be gas fouled, so I'm going to put in a known good one and just see if that makes any difference. If not, then we can move on to, it could either be a stuck open fuel injector, it could be a mechanical problem, it could be spark, it could be a lot of stuff. But alright, I don't think it did anything. Well, that's a lot hotter than it was. Alright. Sounds good, looks good. That looks much better, but it still runs about the same. Let's try this side. 200-ish. Yeah, I'm kind of wondering about that. I'm going to do these 3 plugs on this side and see if that makes any difference. Alright, we have 4 new plugs in. I did the 3 right here and then 1 in the back. The reason why is because when I checked the temperature a second time with a new plug in this cylinder, the temperature was much hotter. So hopefully it works out and runs just a little bit better. Let's see. Still doesn't want to idle. Still runs the same. One of the things that I checked before I did all the spark plugs was fuel pressure. So this is with the key on, and it goes up to 37, 38, and it holds, is what it's supposed to be. If you have any kind of leak down, then you'll see it when you turn the key on. So I'm going to watch this gauge while the car is running and see what it does. Problem is I can't keep it running and look at the gauge at the same time, so we'll figure that out. So here it is with the car running. Honestly, I'm thinking this is going to be injectors, sadly, enough as it is. Sometimes working on these cars can suck, and it can be really frustrating, but I stopped yesterday and I got to thinking last night. I was laying there, I was like, what in the world could be the problem? So I know the car ran fine with the new plugs in it, with the new cap and rotor, so I'm going to rule out the ignition. But what I think happened is it ran fine, it got rained on after the fuel pump was put in and water got in the gas, and then all the times after that, the water was ruining the plugs every time it ran. So I got brand new plugs I'm going to put in. I'm going to put the new plugs in, I'm going to let it run, I'm going to get it hot, and see if we can't get this to idle like it's supposed to. Here's the difference between, on the right, an old fouled spark plug, and on the left, a brand new spark plug. It smells, the old one smells crazy of gas, okay, so either the gas and water mixture fouled out all the plugs and started to run crappy, or there's a problem with the fuel injectors. We're going to go with the cheap option first and see if replacing all the plugs helps. But yeah, I got some good AC Delco plugs instead of these crappy Autolite ones. But the problem is, you see the white middle, that's made of porcelain, and it used to be white on this side. What happens is the gas gets sucked up inside of it, and it just ruins the plug. So hopefully with the new one, it'll work. So I gapped them, we're going to put them all in and see what happens when we fire it up. Alright, moment of truth. As you can tell, it ran the same. Basically nothing has changed. So the cheap fix didn't work. But with that, we can move on to the next thing. It's really going to depend what the owner wants to do, if he wants to spend the money on the injectors and the fuel pump, fuel pressure regulator, or not. So just one of those things that it's a lot of hours and it's a lot of time to replace those fuel injectors. I think it's like 2.5 to 3 to get them apart, and then the same to put it back together, because all this on the top has to come off. Alright everybody, we are back working on Steve's 85. So, per his request, which is probably a good idea, before he wants to throw the big money into the car by doing injectors and all that kind of stuff, he wants to do a compression test on the motor, which in my opinion is probably a good idea considering the amount of miles and how long it's been sitting. So in order to do that, you have to take all the spark plugs out. I've disabled the fuel system by unplugging the fuel pump fuse, and then spinning the motor over cylinder by cylinder and testing the compression. I'm not even to that point yet. I've only taken 2 spark plugs out, but I want you to check these out. So these spark plugs have less than 2 minutes of runtime on them, and look how dirty and fouled they are. And it was funny because this one, believe it or not, I flicked it. Like, okay, you just saw it. Did you see that? Look at all that. That's straight up gas on the windshield. You see that? That came out of the spark plug. So, I mean, what I think is happening is these fuel injectors have gone bad and are just dumping gas into the cylinders. That's why it smokes like crazy when it runs. That's why it misses like crazy. And that's why the spark plugs look like that after 2 minutes of running. I mean, just almost no time at all. The problem with the C4s is, in order to get good fuel injectors, I recommend upgrading them. And then you have to get new seals for all this TPI stuff, which has to come off in order to get the injectors out and replaced. Unlike the LT1, where it's a half an hour job. So we're gonna go ahead and do the compression test. It shouldn't take me too long, but I'm fairly certain the compression is going to be good, in that it's the fuel injector stuff that's got to be the issues. I have all of the spark plugs out, and honest goodness truth, they're all the same. They're all really black and really sooty, and liquid gas came out of a few of them. So we'll get this compression test done. Here's the compression tester. Basically, you plug this end into a spark plug hole, and then with all the rest of the spark plugs out, turn the motor over, and then that piston will push the needle up, and we can check out compression. So we kind of want it to be above 120, but the main thing we want is all 8 cylinders to be even all across, within 10 or 20 psi of each other. And well, I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and when I get the results, I will let you know. Well, the number 1 cylinder is looking good. So we have about, you guys can't even see that, can you? 145 psi on that cylinder. I'm not going to show you all the rest of the cylinders. I'm going to write them down on this pad once I get done. But that's a good start. I like that. There's hope, right? So here's the number 8 cylinder. It's in a nice 150. And here are the results of the motor. So right bank 150, 150, 145, left bank 145, 140, 150, 150. These numbers are awesome. Totally amazed that a car with this many miles, sitting for this many years, has compression numbers that good. What this means is I will now order the fuel injectors and the fuel pressure regulator rebuild kit thing, and all the gaskets and all that other kind of stuff, in order to take it apart and put the new injectors in. It's going to be a little while before I get to that, but what a great result. I'm happy about that. Chevrolet, in their amazing wisdom, they made it difficult to get to the fuel injectors. So these are the parts I have to buy just to do injectors. So 8 injectors and O-rings to go around them. I'm going to do the fuel pressure regulator diaphragm because, well, we're in there already and it's easier to get to. I'm going to replace the temp sender in the front of the motor because, again, we're in there and it's easy to get to. The gasket kit for the 2-port injection, you have to take it apart in order to get to the fuel injectors, so you just need it. that's all I can say. And then I'm going to put 8 new spark plugs in it because the ones that are in there now are gas fouled like crazy. And then if I need to, if it doesn't come in the TPI kit, throttle body gaskets for the throttle body, just to be safe. I have new spark plug wires in the car for it. And as you saw on the other side, the car needs valve cover gaskets like crazy. So those are going to get done too. So it's going to be a huge project, but hopefully by the end of the video, or hopefully by the end of that project, the car will run really nicely. I apologize for the wind noise in advance. It's really why I haven't made much videos of the disassembly process, but I got the old injectors out, and here's a really good example of an old injector, definitely from 1985. They have these little locking pins. Don't forget about those when you're trying to remove the injectors. Here are the new ones from Fuel Injector Connection. They're awesome. I put these in probably 3, maybe 4 other C4s. They just run so much better with these injectors. They're expensive, but guess what? They are worth the money. So they will be going in. Then after that, we're going to do the fuel pressure regulator and the engine temp sender that's down in there. Then it gets all reassembled. But yeah, it's a pain in the butt, and it takes a long time to disassemble all this stuff in order to replace them. So, but with this being done, we should have really, well, a brand new fuel system is what's going to be on this car. Some progress has been made. So as you can see, the new injectors are installed, ready to go. But before I put everything back together, what I want to do is these valve cover gaskets. You can see, if you look down here, I mean, it's just completely soaked with oil all the way down. This driver's side one was much worse than the passenger side one. And the reason why, here's an example of the gasket. I mean, they're just literally rock hard. Made of cork, and probably from 1985. So since I was, this deep into the top of the engine anyway, I was like, well, might as well do the valve cover gaskets. That's one of the things that was on Steve's list. Here's a valve cover that I've cleaned up and is going to be ready for the new valve cover gaskets. I still have to clean up the engine, the cylinder heads and stuff like that. Somebody, I think, has done them already, but they didn't do a very good job. Here's one that I haven't cleaned up. You can just see how gross it is. Once those are together, I can start putting all the TPI stuff back together. One thing I will say though, C4 valve cover gaskets suck. They take like 4 times as long because you have to move stuff over like the smog pump and all this other stuff just to get them off, let alone replace them. So it's a big job, but since I was in here anyway, I figured, hey, might as well do it. The valve cover gaskets that I'm going to be using are these really cool Felpro gaskets. So the normal valve cover gaskets, they're floppy, they're not rigid like this, and these ones have little ridges on both sides that make an even better seal than just regular cork or regular rubber gaskets. They're probably about twice as much, but I'm hoping that I won't have to use silicone on them, and I can just put them on and be done, torque them down. They do come with these little wings that you put on the valve covers. This head is ready to go. I have it all cleaned and looking decent, and fingers crossed it won't leak at all, which, with these gaskets, they're pretty cool. I'm hoping that it won't. I'm gonna try it without silicone. If they do leak, I'll have to end up replacing them, and that will be on me, not on the customer. But there's no instructions that said to use silicone, and since they're rigid, we don't need to glue them to the valve cover because they won't flop or move or anything like that. So we'll see how that goes. We are getting very close to firing this up. I replaced, there's a temp sender right there, and back in the day those used to go bad, and it made the computer think that it was like -20 outside, and it would just load up the engine with gas. And since I'm doing the injectors anyway, we decided that was good, and it was like 20 bucks. It's worth the time to put it in. We have all the new injectors in with the correct wire covers, and also the hose for the emission system crap that's in there. The other side is the same. Got the cover, got all that kind of stuff. Looks really good. Routed all the wiring under here, plugged it all into the various sensors it needs to go to. There's 2 more that I need to put in the throttle body once we get to that point. Next, what we need to do is put the plenum back on. One common mistake that people do is there's a huge vacuum line right here for the brake booster, and if you don't plug that in, your car is going to run like garbage. So make sure you do that. Let's see. Another thing is, I did this on my 85 that I had, that white one. This accidentally, I had looped it underneath here, and it rubbed on the pulley for the water pump and then wore the wires through. So don't do that. Don't be like me. So other than that, yeah, it's just little by little. I gotta clean up some mounting surfaces and then put the plenum back on, and make sure you plug this in. This is your air temperature sensor. Make sure that goes back in because you don't want to forget that. And other than that, the only other thing is I primed the fuel pump. Make sure we didn't have any leaks, both here, and then on all the injectors. So we should be good once we start it up. I also replaced this hose right here, the PCV valve, because it was rock hard, just like almost every other emissions hose on this entire car. Other than that, valve covers are in, all the new gaskets are in, and fingers crossed that they're going to seal. I think they will. They look really nice. There's no slippage or anything that I'm worried about. So one step at a time. Tomorrow will be the day that we fire this up. Well, crazy, stupid. Oh, this car just fights me at every turn. Got all the injectors in, turned over the motor, and didn't start, and then I figured out there's no spark, so I had to replace the ignition module right there in the distributor, and then boom, we had spark. So it started up, idled rough. There's a huge plume of smoke coming from here, smoke coming out of the back of the car. Ran it. It started smoothing out, started evening out, and I was like, all right. I was feeling pretty confident, it wasn't missing, it was sounding really good, and then all of a sudden, I'm sitting in the car, listening to it run, and there's this huge, just steam coming up, and I look down in here, and there's just water everywhere. So I think what happened is that a freeze plug blew out. When I filled the radiator up today, the water was really far down. If you look down here, that's water there. And then if you look on the ground, you can see it's all wet from water coming up, and you can actually see it leaking. You see that right there? So, yeah, there it is. You see it? That blew water all over the exhaust, and it's a huge plume. I don't think this engine has had any kind of pressurized, coolant in it in a long time. And if that one's leaking and one on the front is leaking, then I don't know, is this engine really worth keeping? It's got 170,000 miles on it and has freeze plug problems and leaks oil like crazy. I think crate motor might be the next thing to go. You can see all the coolant on the cross member from the front freeze plugs. But again, this was in a field sitting for a long time, and if it had no coolant fixes, then I feel like I did all that work for nothing. It's really frustrating. Well, we'll see what the owner wants to do. Might get parted, might get capped, might get fixed. It depends on his budget. What's up, guys? So if you've watched this far, you've watched all half an hour of this video on this C4. A little bit of an update. The owner has decided that he doesn't want to continue with the project just because there's just so many more unknowns on the engine. So if we pull the engine and we place the freeze plugs and we put it in, what else could go wrong? We've never really tested the transmission or the rear end or anything like that. And so he's decided maybe we'll shift his money to a different project. So hopefully that will be coming up soon on the channel. I wanted to make another point that I thought was interesting, is that there's a lot of people that watch the TV shows and they see on TV how somebody can bring a car out of a field that's been in a field for 10 years, like this one, replace a battery, replace maybe a fuel pump, clean the tank out, and boom, it fires up and everything works, and it's like it's brand new again. Well, it doesn't happen like that all the time. I wish it did, but it doesn't. There's examples like this car where things just keep happening over and over and over and over, and it kind of just snowballs into a huge project. And it actually happens more than you think. The reason why is because stuff like this, that doesn't make it on TV. No show is going to put a car where, just problem after problem after problem, and they dump it. I mean, that's not what viewers want to see, and that's not ever what happens. They always put the ones that, are magic, and it's so much fun and so easy. And in reality, a lot of times it's not. There's a lot of stuff you don't see. So Steve is basically the first customer that I've had at my shop. If you're interested in getting your car worked on by me, my shop rate is $50 an hour, which You know, considering all the other Corvette shops around Texas, at least, it's a pretty good deal. The other thing is you'll get a video like this on your car, so you'll be able to see me fix everything that goes wrong with your car and see the progress once it's done. If that interests you at all, you can contact me through YouTube, also through social media, places like Facebook, Instagram, places like that. And I thank you guys for watching this ridiculously long video, but hopefully you got your C4 Corvette dose in for at least a little bit until I make another video.